So my name is Andrew Richardson. I'm the SVP of Analytics and Marketing Science at Tenuity. We are a digital marketing agency all over the country and the world, actually. And I will not talk very much about myself today, but I wanted to just intro myself. I am the leader of the Virtual Marketing Tug, and really excited to get this off the ground and for everybody to be able to take advantage of the great minds that we have within this Tableau community on the marketing side of things, and I'm really excited to do this. So some housekeeping things. If you're interested from a hashtagging perspective, Marketing Tug is what we're going with. If you want to tweet something or put something up on the gram or anything on LinkedIn, we'd love to see what you all are thinking and how you're enjoying this so far. We did set up a LinkedIn group. I put it into a bit.ly so it's a little easier to remember, just Marketing Tug LinkedIn. Please go join that group if you're interested. Would love to let you be a part of it and extend this community beyond just these meetings that we will have from time to time. And speaking of time to time, from a meeting cadence perspective, we're going to be working off of this a little bit and as we go, figuring out if we're going to do this monthly or every other month. It really comes down to the content that you all want to see and us being able to help procure some of that for you, on a timely basis. So more to come on that side. Before we do get into our first speaker of the day, I do want to make sure that I, send a big shout out to the Tableau crew, Britt and Alyssa and the entire marketing group that has helped us get this off of the ground now over the last months. Obviously, a big thank you to Chris and Amanda, who are going to be speaking today, but this is no small undertaking, obviously, for a brand new user group, let alone virtual during the COVID times that we all live in. And so we're just really fortunate to have the support of Tableau and obviously our amazing speakers today. Spread the word, right? Get it out there. Let's get more folks engaged here from the marketing world. I'm going to kick it over now to Christopher Scott. He is going to talk to us today. You can read. I'm not going to read for you on what his title is. Chris is the Application Development Manager at Genworth MI, and really excited for him to be here today. Chris, thank you so much. Last little thing that I almost forgot. Ask questions in the chat. Ask questions in the Q&A. We are going to have time in between each of these presentations, after the presentations, for those questions to be answered by our speakers, and would love to make sure you get what you want out of this. I'll have a few more links to share at the end and a little bit more information as well. So Chris, over to you. I'm going to stop sharing, and
all right,
it's all yours. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Yes, my pleasure. Well, thank you, Andrew, for having me. And it is truly an honor to be here with Amanda. I have heard her speak at Tableau conference and have seen her work, and so to be honored to be part of this group and speak with her is like I said, it's an honor. Really quick, so seen a few people notice this on chat. If you want to tell us what your name is, where you're from, if you do have a home tug, tell us where you're coming from. But I just like to see a few people, some Iowa folks in the DSM Tug. Love my DSM Tug folks. Anybody from RDU Tug or anywhere else, hit it up on the chat. Let us know where you're from. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started and just talk about social media data, social media analytics, how we use Tableau, and all of these facets. So I've titled this aptly, Listen, the Power of the Human Voice. So as you know, Tableau is all about seeing and understanding your data. So we're not going to go against the grain here, but we're going to hopefully leverage some of our other senses besides just the eyes in order to hopefully help us to analyze our data better. Again, the whole purpose here is that we have our data, we can see and we can understand. That way we can make better decisions with that data. So again, thank you, Andrew. My name is Christopher Scott. I am an application development manager. I also lead our Center of Excellence or Center of Enablement, depends on which day you talk to me, at Genworth Mortgage Insurance in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am also the leader and one of the co-leaders of the Raleigh-Durham Tableau user group. You can find us on Twitter at RDUTug. #RDUTug. You can also find me on Twitter at CGScottDVA. I'm also very privileged to be one of the Tableau ambassadors, specifically for the Tableau user group. And so little plug there. This user group, I've been very, very excited to get this. It's been a long time coming, and I'm very thankful for Andrew and the team at Tableau for helping to get this started. I've always, for the past probably 5 or 6 years since I got really working in this space and working with this data, I've been, as you know, I'm a big proponent of the Tableau community. I lead the Tableau user group in Raleigh. I've helped spin up other Tableau user groups throughout the state and throughout the country. So I'm very passionate, not only about the Tableau community, but also about the user groups. I think it's one of the most foundational pieces of the Tableau community, how we interact with one another, how we grow, how we develop as individuals, as well as a community. So anyway, so so kind of shameless plug there, but that is what I do. That's my role as a Tableau ambassador, and I'm so thankful for that opportunity. All right, so let's get back into the meat of the presentation. So all about listening. So everyone, as you know, and there we go. Everyone has a voice. So it's, you're hearing me speak right now. I'm sure you've all spoken to someone today. If you've been up for longer than, sorry for our West Coast folks who've been up for longer than an hour, you've spoken to someone, people have heard you, and you're listening, right? We want to not just speak, but we also want to listen as well. So everyone has a voice, from our clients to our customers, even our employees. So all of this, everything that we're going to talk about today is relevant if you're working in marketing, if you're working in HR, if you're working as a CEO of a company, if you're working as a salesperson, or wherever your role is. This is crucial for social media and marketing and all of that data. But I think this has a more wide breadth or scope of application to how we use this type of data. So as I was researching this topic a few years ago and really starting to get into what, all of this data and the social media data and how we leverage it, I ran across this book. Honestly, I'm going to be candid here. It was one of the first books that came up on the Amazon list on social media data and analytics, and so how we leverage that. So I started reading this book as I was kind of preparing for a presentation. I was preparing to go to a conference on all of this, and within the first chapter, this came up, and I felt like this really laid the foundation for the book and laid the foundation for really what we're doing with this data and how we want to think about our customers and our how we leverage the power of the voice. So it says here, I'll just read it really quickly. So consumers want to discuss what they like, the companies they support, and the organizations and leaders they resent. So what they like and what they don't like. They want a community. They want to be heard. Consumers now demand that the business becomes a compelling experience, which moves the power from the executive boardroom, where decisions used to be made, to the living rooms of everyday consumers. So again, we want to leverage, we want to kind of democratize data. We want to make sure that we're making decisions with the most amount of data that we can get, right? So this is not entirely different from what employees now demand too. Both consumers and employees are telling us how, where, and when they want to work with us. They're better informed. Again, back to data. They have more data. They can actually get information now at the drop of a finger with their phone, on their iPad, on the internet, and they expect more. So obviously, not to use that cliche phrase, more power comes more responsibility. The more data we have, the more they're going to expect of us, of our companies, things that we're doing, and so they have a voice to make a strong impact. Now, we as gatherers of this data and of listeners, good listeners, right? We have two choices of what to do with that. So we know people are going to talk. We know kind of where they're going to talk, which we'll get to in just a minute. But we as analysts, as if we're running a company, if we're helping to make decisions about our company, about the way we do things, we have two choices here. And the first is we can passively listen. So we can gather all the data, we can look at the dashboards, and we can just kind of start to make some insights and do some things with that data. So, but but it goes no further than that. I used to make this great example of why, we talk about Tableau and Tableau Server and Tableau Public, about why these things are so critical, because you can just take data, create a great, beautiful dashboard. I mean, I was guilty of this myself. I just created these dashboards and they didn't go anywhere. Besides me and maybe my team, they really just sat on my desktop, and I shared them in meetings and whatnot, but they really didn't go anywhere. So that was in essence passively listening. All I was doing was gathering data, creating some dashboards, creating some analytics with it, but it really wasn't helping me, my bosses, our company to make better, more informed decisions. So our second option with all of this data is what we can do with it is to engage. So how do we move from passively listening to actively engaging with our people? And that's where, our authors come back and help us out. So he says we can, by choice, help inform, educate, teach people about what we do, what we stand for, and how we plan to change their lives. So we're now part of the story. We're not just listening to the story and reading, but we're actually diving in head first and using this data to help us to communicate and bring these insights so that are going to help us better engage and be active with the community with which we're a part of, right? All right, so there's, I kind of give this next part as kind of a shameless plug. When I think about companies out there that do this and do this well, I can think of no better company than Tableau itself. And so again, I know it's a shameless plug. It's a Tableau user group. I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but as we think about companies that are doing this well and ways that they're actively engaging with their customers, but also with their community and how they're being actively engaging on all platforms, right? So when we think about community, we have things like this user group. We have local user groups. We have user groups all throughout the world where we can come together and we can actively participate. We can learn, we can grow, we can do all of these things. And then obviously the number one way that this community gets together is every year, and now multiple times a year, with the different global user groups and global communities, is at Tableau Conference. Now this, and I know Andrew's going to talk about this later, but things are a little bit different this year, and we will be meeting virtually this year. But still, it is, I think that really, it can be you can look at it one way or another. My optimistic self tells me that now we've lowered the bar of entry, so we can gather together throughout the entire world, and now getting a plane ticket, a hotel, getting the time off of work so we can travel has been done away with. So now as a community, we can gather all throughout the world together to learn and to grow and to be a community and engage with one another. So Tableau does a fantastic job of creating these avenues like the user groups and the forums and working on social media. So Tableau is not one to just sit back and, like something or retweet, this tweet or that tweet, but they are actively engaging in social media to better this community and to engage with their customers and the people in the world around them to, in all honesty, to make the world a better place with data. And so I think that's a, hashtag data fam. Thank you, Michelle. So I think that is the perfect, example of a company that just gets it. How can they move from the passive listening to actually engaging and actively being a part of the community that they're involved with? Well, this is a Tableau user group. We are all data analysts. And so when we think about ways that we can listen to data, well, we know that the data has a story. We talk about the storytelling with data, right? So we can listen to data, but oftentimes it's really, really difficult to listen with data because, as you've all heard the phrase before, kind of the signal and the noise. Oftentimes we're given just this massive glob of data, and it's typically in spreadsheet format via Excel, and it's really difficult to glean insight and to drive analytics from just this massive amount of the noise that's out there. We're listening for the signal, but we've just got so much noise around us, it's difficult to pinpoint in. So this is where, and we're not even talking about Tableau at this point, just the fact of leveraging visual analytics to help us to really focus in and listen to our data better. So the easier we can see and understand the data, the quicker we can listen and then effectively make better decisions based on that data. So when we can see some of the, the critical points, like a simple bar chart or multiple bar charts or a highlight table like these, it really helps us to dive down into the data and really get a better picture of what's going on and really listen for those cues, for the signal, right? So let's talk about a practical way we can do this. Now, we talk about the voice of people, and in 2020, there is no better way for people to express their voice and their opinion than social media. So for us that are looking to actively listen to our customers, to our clients, to our employees, to just our community around us, I dare say, I'll make the bold, brash statement out front, we are being irresponsible as global citizens to our, people to our companies if we're not actively listening to what they're saying on social media. So within social media data, we have kind of the typical facets, the typical questions, if you want to call them, of journalism. So the who's saying these things? Where are they saying them? When are they saying them? What are they saying? And these pieces, especially the what, which we'll get into in just a moment, really help us to drive down into the all ever important, really the whole reason behind why we analyze data is the why. So we look at all of these facets, but in order to hopefully help us answer the question of why are these people talking? Yes, they're expressing their opinions. They're telling us who they like, what they want to do, what they don't like, any of these things. And so we have to try as good analysts, right? We're always searching. We don't want to just tell the descriptive analytics, right? So we want to dive down into the why are they saying these things? Why do they feel the need to express their opinion about this or that, and help us to dive down into how to, engage those people and help them to, us to make better decisions for them, right? Because without this constant flow and connection with our customers, with our clients, with our employees, we need that constant communication and connection to help better, right, our bottom line. If we're talking about, being a company, we want to obviously make money. And so we need to do things that are going to help our customers, our consumers, our clients, our employees to help that their decisions and help them to make, to come to our company, to help stay with our company. And so there's lots of facets where this information and this ever important why is so important to everything that we do. And so I created, as part of this exercise a few years ago, I started looking at some data. And so in particular, we were looking at social media data. And I thought there was a really good, aspect of all of these pieces of data within Twitter data. So there are lots of social media platforms. There's lots of ways, hopefully Amanda will help us to glean all the ways that we can gather this data together. But one in particular that gives us access, and free and public access, is Twitter. So many of you may or may not know, there is a Twitter public API, and Tableau has, within the Tableau community, and all of these things are coming back together. In the Tableau community, there are native connectors out there using web data connectors to the Twitter public API. So you can go out to the public API, search for any, username, search for any hashtag, search for any text within within Twitter, and it brings back a result. And the fantastic thing is it brings back the entire breadth of the data. So you have all of the demographic pieces, and you have the ever important the content that you need. So this was kind of an example here. This was a version of a dashboard that I created. Again, the content here is specifically about Trump. So I know, polarizing topic, right? But when we want data, sometimes we have to get our hands dirty a little. So I'm looking at this data, and you know what? I don't want to show you just the dashboard. So I'm actually going to back out. and we're going to dive right into Tableau Public. So here on Tableau Public, all of you can find me if you're ever so interested at CG Scott, and you can look at my Tableau Public profile, and it is not locked down. All of my visits you can download, you can get all the data from all of these things. So when I looked at the Twitter data, again, this is Twitter public API that you can log into. I just started to look at and ask those journalistic questions, right? I want to know who's saying it. I want to know what they're saying. I want to know where they're saying it, when they're saying it. And then this little important piece here of how they're saying it. So when I look at the where they're saying it, so this is kind of our first jump into the data. I see a few, obviously lots of information on, this particular sample was from a few years ago, and throughout the presidency, there's been a lot of talk. We know that a vast majority of those tweets are going to come from the United States. Well, I noticed something a little bit interesting here. Then we've got here this data coming from Peru. So it's a big dot. And so we can start to analyze, dive deeper into the data. So as we jump up and down, we see, these tweets. Well, unfortunately, the Twitter Public API, I forgot to mention earlier, only gives us the last 5,000 tweets. Well, those of you that are already reading into the data here, we notice it goes from 211 to 214. So yes, so within 3 minutes of time, we've reached the 5,000 mark. So that does include tweets and retweets, but lots and lots of data here just within 3 minutes. So there are ways that you can get more data out of Twitter, and there are paid platforms. But for the purpose of just kind of gleaning some insights, right? We want to look into these things. So I'm seeing when they're saying it. I'm seeing how they're saying it. So I noticed it's very interesting that when we move from a global population, you notice the vast majority of people are talking on using their iPhones, their Androids, and then a good percentage of the people are using the Twitter web client. Well, when I look at people in Peru, so if I am, I'm a marketing agency, and I want to think about, the different ways we can traffic our ads or ad traffic. I'm not in the space, so so I'm going to let the smart people, let you understand what I'm saying here. But if I'm gonna drive my ads, and I know that let's say I do have clients in Peru, and I want to drive them, I'm probably not going to spend as much on the iPhone platform as I would maybe the web platform, because I know a majority of my clients, of my users, they're all talking, but not a lot of them are talking using the iPad or using the iPhone. So I'm probably going to drive those things toward the web. So those are key pieces of data that help me drive in. And now we get into really the what here. So when we look at all of this data, we can actually start to drive down and see what are they actually saying. And this gets to my next point, which is helps us to drive down and use some of the tools and technology to research and to see what it is that they're actually saying, and help us to analyze and get down to the why. So that, as you saw here, this is a simple version. I actually recreated this for one of our Makeover Monday challenges, and just to kind of talk about community and you all in the as people in the user group, you all are part of this community. If you are not actively involved in the Makeover Monday community, it is a fantastic opportunity to get data that you may not ever see before. So we've had everything from Twitter data. You have lots of sports data, food data. I mean, the amount of data sets that this community curates and puts together for Makeover Monday challenges, it is beyond impressive. And so if you're looking for good ways to level up your visualization skills, as well as to interact, engage with the community, the Makeover Monday, which is makeovermonday.co.uk, get involved, get plugged in, and you can obviously go in and participate, share your data sets. It is a fantastic opportunity. And hey, go get the book. Fantastic ways that you can get started right away improving your data skills. The other one that I will mention is Workout Wednesday. If you're looking for ways to grow in not only just creating visualizations, but in really stretching and growing yourself using Tableau, there's no other better platform than Workout Wednesday. It is one of the hardest and most rewarding things that I've done in my time as in the Tableau community, is participating in the Workout Wednesday challenges. You will certainly be stretched. I personally know all of the leaders from the Workout Wednesday group, and they are bright and brilliant. Most of them are Zen masters. But yeah, and so we can go over those. But yeah, I will just say that Workout Wednesday is great. But this is what I took. It was specifically on tweets from @RealDonaldTrump, and I utilized something that used to be in other data tools, but now with Tableau Prep, you can actually get in and take the content field, which has, as you saw before here, it has all of this data, right? And now you can take and you can do a split. And so I just split them on every single space, and then you pivot those. And then what I noticed was now I've got every single word that's coming from each of those tweets. And now I can aggregate those and then put them in a nice, neat word cloud. And then when I actually click on, so I choose to be optimistic here in our data analysis. So I'm going to look at things like thanks, and rather than anything negative. So when I click on the word thanks, I can not only see when that word was said, but I can also look at exactly the tweets that were said for that specific word. So this is utilizing the tools and technologies that we have, again, using Tableau Prep to prep your data, split all the words out, grab your data, and then using Tableau to just create a simple dashboard that's going to help you better analyze and get through all of that noise down to the signal of what is actually being said. So what are the top words that people are saying about your product or your company, or this particular politician, if you're analyzing that data, right? So but what we want to do is we want to look at and not just get the top words, but we actually want to see what it is they're saying. And then if you're ever so inclined, you can then take all of that, import that into more data in more tools, and actually start to do sentiment analysis. So great question. Andrew, I'm going to go ahead and take this for the irrelevant words. With Tableau, you can actually go to, and I'm actually going to do this live. I used what's called the stop words in LTK. And so you can take these stop words data set, and you can directly join them and then do an exclude, or it's actually a left join without the center in Tableau Prep. And so you can exclude all of those words like the, and that's why in my example here, besides a few of these, like the well, that's really not even in there. I did that, and I was able to take out words like the, as you notice, it did not take out the TH because it's not an exact science. But I think that's a really critical part in analyzing this data, is utilizing the stop words and getting rid of a lot of the noise, so you can get down to the signal. All right, so again, what we're doing here is we're taking data and we're listening. These are actual people. Whoever's tweeting this, it's typically, there are tweet bots, we're aware of that, but it's typically people. And so we want to listen to what they're saying. And oftentimes, again, I'm not making any kind of judgment call here, but often people are more honest behind a keyboard because of the perceived anonymity of that data. And so if we actually want to listen to people rather than going to a focus group or doing active real-time polling, we can actually look in and see what are their true thoughts, where they feel like they have the most freedom to express that data. So anyway, all of this to say is that if we want to take a position and go from where we just passively listen to this data and really seek to understand, to analyze, and then engage with our followers, with our customers, with our clients. We truly want to listen and actively listen to our people. We have to analyze, we have to do better about analyzing and understanding our data and understanding what people are saying, so we can hopefully, again, make better products, make better companies, and make, at the end of the day, make a better world. All right, Andrew, that is my time. Thank you so much for having me.
Christopher, thank you so much. We're going to open it up for maybe about a minute or two. If you have any other questions, that we'll throw them in the chat, throw them in the Q&A. We want to make sure we kick it over to Amanda. She can go ahead and start getting her screen shared up.
All right. So
awesome. If you have other questions, feel free to put them into the chat or into the Q&A. We will absolutely get to those questions. There is one question that we'll answer around recommendations for sentiment analysis tools. We'll make sure that we get that answered and into the Q&A portion as well. But in the meantime, I'm going to kick it over to Amanda to go ahead and take us through some creative marketing analytics. Thanks, Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. So first of all, I'm just honored to be speaking with the other couple of folks on the call here today. I know that Chris alluded to Makeover Monday. I highly recommend you check out his Tableau Public profile. There are some very impressive Makeover Mondays on that list. So it's really just awesome to be here, both with the speakers as well as with the rest of the marketing data fam. How cool is it that we actually get a group of marketers all together talking about some of the challenges that we run into on a daily basis. So as Andrew mentioned, I'm planning to talk about creative marketing analytics today. And by that, I mean creative in kind of two senses of the word. So first, I mean creative like marketing creatives. How do you identify not only which creatives are really effective, and then also why those creatives are really effective? And in order to answer that second question, we have to bring in a little bit of creativity when it comes to the measurement of that overall performance. So today I'm going to show a really cool dashboard that we've developed that helps to drill into that topic. And then I'm also going to talk about, kind of what we do on the back end to get the data in place and then run some analytics on top of that as well. Alrighty, let's go ahead and jump in. So first, just an introduction about myself. I'm Amanda Gessert. I'm VP of Analytics at Merkle. And the best part about my role is that I get to manage the data visualization and measurement strategy teams at Merkle. So that means I get to hang out with all of the folks on my team, thinking through really cool ways to visualize data. How can we provide innovative insights to our clients? And honestly, I think I just have the best job in the whole world. And I mentioned before that I work for Merkle. So Merkle is a marketing agency. And one thing that makes us a little bit unique is that our foundation is really on data and analytics. So that means as we're thinking about effective ways to help our clients both execute marketing as well as measure that marketing, we're really, really rooted in this idea of getting the data and building sophisticated analytics on top of that data to help answer some of those questions around performance. Now, for those of you that are working in marketing, this probably looks familiar. You're either consuming these or you're building performance media reports on a regular basis that perhaps looks something like this. So the example that I'm giving here, it's for display media. Although if you're measuring your marketing, whether it's email or even site analytics, whether you're looking at direct mail, or even some of your brand marketing, you're probably looking at something or even building something that looks a bit like this. So I've got the ability to do some light filtering at the top. I can drill down into different date ranges. I can choose a specific campaign I'm interested in. And then ultimately, I'm looking at all of these different KPIs to try to understand for those individual campaigns and across maybe even all my campaigns, how exactly am I doing? Am I driving revenue with my marketing for my organization? And once I've looked through all of those top line KPIs, perhaps I've done a little month over month or year over year analysis, which you can see just below that, all the way down into kind of the finest granularity of a drill down, I start to ask the question around which campaign and which creative ultimately perform the best. And the way that I'm frequently answering this question is by using a view similar to this, looking across all of those KPIs, trying to judge for those different creatives, which were driving the most conversions, which were driving the most engagement. So in the case of display, who's clicking on those and how frequently are they clicking on those, so that I can make some decisions around which creatives I might want to use moving forward. Some clients that we work with are doing even more sophisticated decisioning, leveraging tools like DCO in order to intelligently make some decisions around which creatives should be served to which audiences. However, none of those approaches, whether this or even leveraging a DCO, really get to the question not only about which creatives are effective, but why. And so that got our team thinking, like, what could we do in order to understand why certain creatives perform better than others? And so our approach for answering that question is first to collect some of those creative images. Because if you noticed on that previous report, it wasn't particularly visual. I had creative 1, creative 2, but I don't really know what those are. And so step 1 here was collecting a number of different creative images and then loading those up into a cloud storage location. Next, what we did was we took the KPI trends that we saw associated to those creative images. So for example, we ran a campaign with perhaps this very famous. So we brought together the KPI trends with the creative images, and then we also supplemented that with some of the campaign metadata. So who was the customer segment that it was targeted to? In the case of a display ad, right? Who was the publisher? And is there any additional information around that targeting strategy? Was it related to a promotion, as an example? Bringing together all of that metadata in addition to the KPIs and the images themselves. All right, so once we've got all of those data inputs pulled together, then the next step is to supplement that with what we call feature processing. Now, there are a ton of tools out there that you can leverage. All of the major cloud vendors have a tool. I'm sure there are some Python packages you could use as well. But essentially, there's a series of tools out there that use an AI vision algorithm to scan an image and to pull out what the individual features of that image are. And so what I mean by features are literally the components that make up that particular image. For example, is there a face? If there's a face, what emotion does that face have? Is it one of joy or sadness, concern? Are there objects that are present within that creative image? For example, we see a number of peaches here. What's the text that's included within that creative? And more than that, so words, objects, all sorts of things. These algorithms have a catalog of information that it's scanning the image, looking to identify, and then it's extracting that from the image. So now, in addition to the creative image itself, the KPIs around the performance of that image, and the metadata associated to that campaign, we also have an inventoried list of all of the features that were contained within that creative image. Okay, so now that we've got all of that, the next step is to try to determine which of those creative features were most influential when it comes to performance. So if you imagine we've got 100 different creative images and maybe, I don't know, 20 of them contain peaches. Now they could have been targeted to different audiences, they could have been part of different campaigns, but the one consistent theme is that they all contain peaches. Well, by running a machine learning algorithm on top of that, essentially an attribution type of algorithm, we're able to identify what the incremental effect of including peaches in that creative might be. And so as we've now run the feature processing and this feature attribution step, finally, of course, right, we need to get insights out of that information. And so that's where Tableau comes in. It helps us to gain a portal into that data so that we can start to make decisions around what future creatives should be. We know, for example, that of those 20 that contain peaches, peaches performed really well. We should probably include peaches in some of our future creatives. All right, so I think I've talked just about enough about exactly how all of this is put together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to hop into the Tableau dashboard, and I'm going to walk through some of the cool ways that we found to slice and dice this type of data. All righty, so let me go ahead and hop into the dashboard here. Because I'm doing a live demo on our server, let me go ahead and hit the refresh button as well, and then we'll go ahead and pump this up to full screen so that everybody can see it. Alrighty, awesome. Okay, so here we're looking at our creative performance analysis dashboard. Now, what's really cool about this is I like how it starts pretty high level. Let's get a survey of the data, because this is kind of a new way of looking at our creative data. And then as I scroll down, you'll see we're going to progressively drill further and further and further into the data to find deeper insights. All right, so if I start at the very top here, you can see that I could choose the target variable. Now, this is where this type of analysis diverges quite a bit from that typical performance analysis report that I showed early on, where I originally was looking at a whole bunch of different KPIs. Here, instead, I'm going to choose one particular KPI I want to hone in on, and then I'm going to go very deep into the influential features that are impacting that KPI. Now, in the spirit of keeping this as easy to access and to use data that's as readily available as we can, I'm going to walk through this example using click-through rate. So if you assume that what we're looking at here are a bunch of display ads, you would get the information back around the performance of those display ads, including performance metrics like click-through rate. So for context, that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at a display example. And if I start over here on the left-hand side, you can see that we've got a distribution of the average incremental effect on click-through rate across all features included in my data set. Now remember, I'm talking here now about features, not just creatives. So these are the individual items that were extracted from those creative images. And if I hover over one of these, you can see exactly what I mean. So as I'm looking at all of the creative images that had a somewhat positive incremental effect on click-through rate, I can see the features that were extracted include an object of clothing, the word new, the inclusion of an object fruit, there's that peach in there, right? And the object of some sort of dairy, and the object of some sort of pastry. So these are all of the different features that have been returned by the algorithm as having a somewhat positive incremental effect on click-through rate. Now, what you can see from the overall chart here is that for the most part, it follows kind of a normal distribution curve. I've got some that are really negative. I've got some that are really positive. And if you imagine as a marketer trying to make decisions around what the next creative should contain, those really positive and those really negative features are the ones that I'm going to be really interested in. And so that's what I'm looking at here on the right-hand side. I've got a top 5, bottom 5, where I can identify which features were super, super positive and which features were super, super negative. And so right off the bat, I can see the word baking. That was great. We should be including the word baking in our creatives all day long. It has a super positive incremental effect on click-through rate, and that's awesome. So we should really, include the word baking. On the converse side, if you look here at the number 1 negative, it's including an object that's an animal. So I really should avoid including those cute puppies and kittens in my creative, because it turns out that just the inclusion of that feature decreases the incremental effect on my click-through rate by on average 1.11%, which is bad, right? We don't want to include features in our creatives that are going to have a detrimental effect to our overall engagement rate. So this gives me a great way to just kind of gain some overview on exactly what's working really well, and then perhaps what's not working so well at all. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pop down here, and we're going to go a little bit deeper now into our analysis. So perhaps I'm interested in getting more understanding for the features that were included, whether positive or negative, exactly how successful were they, right? So let me just take an example here with the word baking. You can see for the word baking that, as I pointed out above, it has a really positive incremental effect on click-through rate. Well, that's great, right? But I want to understand, since this is an aggregate view, if that's true across all creatives that included the word baking, or if it's only true for some of the creatives that included the word baking. And so if I want to get an idea of what the spread of my data looks like, now we get into some kind of cool Tableau functionality. If I select the word baking here, you can see now this bar has been changed out to show a dot plot. And what's awesome about including functionality like this is I can now see the spread of the information, right? So I can see for the word baking that there's a lot of really positive incremental effects on click-through rate, and I actually didn't have any creatives that had a negative incremental effect on click-through rate. Well, that's awesome. So I feel all the more better now about including the word baking in some of the future creatives that I might execute. Let's go ahead and take another example. If I come down here and I take a look at the object tableware and I drill into that, you can see I've got a little bit of a different story that I'm telling now. There was one creative that looked pretty positive. You can see it had a relatively positive incremental effect on click-through rate. However, there were a number of other creatives that had neutral or even somewhat negative incremental effect on click-through rate. So if I just pop out of this again and we take a look at the average, you can see that it looks as though it's somewhat positive. But I may want to treat this with a little bit of caution because I am seeing in the spread some positive and some negative. And so as I consider whether I should include the object tableware in some of my future analysis, I'm really going to want to do some testing around that to ensure that that somewhat positive response is trustworthy and it stays consistent at scale. So this helps me, again, get kind of that one level deeper into some of the feature analysis that I'm doing here to determine exactly how trustworthy the data is that I'm looking at. Alrighty, let's go ahead and take a look over here on the right-hand side, because this, again, gets a little bit deeper into some of the trustworthiness of the insights that I'm obtaining from doing this type of analysis. So if you take a look on the x-axis that I have here, I've got the number of creatives. So if I increase the number of creatives, what I can take a look at is what the average incremental effect on click-through rate across those different features that were present in a lot of creatives were. And then I can also look at some of those that were only included in some creatives. Now let's take, for example, this object animal. So if I hover over my data here, you can see I've got this really cool Vision tooltip that pops up, and it helps me to understand object animal in the context of all of my other creatives as well as my features. So you can see across each one of the different lines here within my Vision tooltip that I have a dark black dot. And that black dot represents where that object animal fits on the overall distribution across all of my different creative images. So here I can see that object animal was only included in one creative. Well, already I know that I should treat that very, very negative rating with a bit of caution. It was only included in one creative, and it's very possible that that means there were other factors that may have driven that very negative average incremental effect on click-through rate. So that's going to require some more testing. If I go down a line, I can see that there's also a distribution curve here across the importance of that particular feature. And importance is a statistical value that we're calculating. Essentially what it's telling me is how trustworthy is this particular observation? So how much statistical rigor do I feel is behind the measurement? And here we can see, even though there was only one occurrence of an object animal, it's kind of medium importance. It was a severe enough average incremental detriment on my click-through rate that I may want to pay close attention to this. And in fact, if we go one line down, I can see that it was the worst incremental effect on click-through rate across all of my different features that I analyzed, and that the total click-through rate on this particular creative was the worst as well. So just a little bit of a fun bit around Tableau here, looking at Vision Tooltip like this. So full credit, by the way, goes to Anthony Fancher on my team, who one is the designer of this dashboard, and two, figured out how to get this functionality to work. Because a fun fact is that making a highlight action in a Vision Tooltip, like we're looking at here, function, it doesn't work. And so the way that you need to do this is we're actually leveraging a parameter action. So as I'm hovering over the object animal, it's using that to populate a parameter, and then we have a parameter action with a calculated field indicating yes or no. That's determining whether it should be highlighted black or whether it should fade into the background. So you can see here as I highlight different items and that Vision Tooltip populates back up. Let's see, there we go. But that black dot is going to move. So that's actually a parameter action within a Vision Tooltip that's helping to provide the insight into the overall distribution. All right. So one of the other neat things that I really like about this view is not only can I look at the number of creatives and then the incremental effect on click-through rate, I can also look at the relationship between the number of creatives across my total click-through rate. I can look at importance, and I just really like the way that this functions. You certainly could have accomplished a similar goal by using a parameter swapper to change the value that's populated here on the y-axis. But instead what we did was use the set actions capability here so that I've got these really nice big buttons that I can press. It's very obvious that there's interactivity that's present here so that I can kind of fine tune and change the information that I'm looking at on the screen. So another just kind of fun Tableau function that was added here to this view that I think adds a lot of ease when it comes to inspiring folks to engage with the visualization itself. Alrighty, now I mentioned we're just going to keep getting deeper, so we're going to go one level deeper now to talk about what happens when you look at not just one feature within a creative, but what happens when you start to look at the interaction between multiple features, right? So if I included not one but two features in a creative, and I want to run a little bit of a what-if analysis, what is the impact going to be on performance? And so this is where I think things start to get really, really cool, and we can get a little bit more detailed around some projections and some planning for what I should do in the future, really drilling into that question around why as we talk about creative performance. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play around here, and I'm going to choose a few different types of features, and we can see what the effect is as I choose those. So I'm just going to hit my little drop down arrow, and you can see I've got all of my different features as well as the relative importance of those features that's popped up on the screen. So I can begin to use this in order to choose what it is I want to look at. And I'm going to start here by choosing the object pastry. So I want to take a look at what would happen for creatives that happen to include the object pastry as one of the features in that creative. Okay, so I've selected object pastry as my primary feature, and now I'm going to choose a secondary feature. So you can see I've got a number of secondary features that I can choose here, and if I scroll all the way down, sure enough, I've got object dessert. Now this one I happen to know is kind of interesting, so I'm gonna drill into this one first, where I'm looking at the intersection between including both an object that's a pastry as well as an object that's a dessert. And to analyze what that interaction looks like, I'm going to hop over here and take a look at my little foursquare. So let's look at first this bottom right square. And you can see as I hover over this, I've got a handy little tooltip that pops up to make sure that I'm interpreting these numbers correctly. So if we assume that object pastry is present, so we got a pastry that's somewhere in the creative, and object dessert is present, so we've got a dessert that's also in the creative, right? then the predicted lift in click-through rate is a positive 0.21%, which would result in a predicted click-through rate of 2.84% on that creative. Now, what I think is really cool about looking at things on a four-square like this is I can see what the presence or the absence of each of those features might ultimately drive. So as an example, I can quickly see, based on this dark blue row on the bottom, that the inclusion of an object pastry is really great. If I am missing the object pastry, then my click-through rate is going to be about 2.62%. If I include a dessert, it's going to go slightly higher to 2.63%. But if I include a pastry, my goodness, we're looking at 2.82, 2.84. It's quite a bit of a difference. So pastries, great. I should be including pastries all day long. Now, this leads to the question of, well, exactly which pastries or what type of pastries or what type of desserts should I include? And that's where if I hop over here onto the right side, I can start to get even more detailed into that analysis by looking at past performance. So I'll step back for just a second here because there's a nuance to this type of analysis that I think is even more cool. I am able to predict what the intersection of including both of those features together might be, even if I didn't have a creative that included both of those features to begin with. But in this particular case, dessert and pastry, I happen to have 3 different creatives that included both of those objects that we can take a look at. Now, the way that I can tell that there were both the primary and the secondary features present is by the presence of the blue bubbles, okay? So all of the gray bubbles indicate the primary feature was present, which is object pastry, but it indicates that the second feature was absent, which would be object dessert. So again, I'm interested in the intersection of where both object pastry and object dessert were both present. And so if I come over here and take a look at the blue bubbles, I can get a little bit of detail. I can see it was creative number 1012, and it had the not so helpful creative name of 1012. Now, I often spend a lot of time talking about data quality and integrating data and strategy for getting your data all situated. But let's face it, as marketers, often you're getting information that looks a whole lot like this. I have no idea what creative name 1012 means. And so this was a really big driver for why we wanted to develop this dashboard so that I could quickly answer that question of what 1012 is without having to go dig in a pile of PDFs. And so what we did was we actually loaded in all of the creative images, and after running that algorithm over them, made sure to maintain that association between the performance associated to creative, in this case, 1012, and the actual creative image itself, 1012. And so to do this in Tableau, to actually show the creative image, we're actually running a URL action in order to pull back this particular image that's, in our case, it's hosted in a cloud storage location for us. And so what's super great about this is I don't have to guess what 1012 was. I can actually pull back the image and I can see it for myself. All right, so let's just scroll back up here for a second and talk about why I think this is kind of an interesting image. So first, on the x-axis here, I'm looking at the likeliness that the object was a pastry. And so in this case, I can see that the likeliness that this object was a pastry, it's about 50-50. And in fact, if I scroll down here again and I look at that image, I can kind of see why. It looks a little bit like a log. It's not super visually compelling. And honestly, that's probably why I had somewhat negative performance associated to this creative, because I don't look at this and go like, ooh, this looks great. Like I'm super excited to try Virginia's most famous cake. I don't know, it's a little bit lackluster. Now, I do have to add a little bit of a caveat because, of course, we did not actually market this creative. In the effort to ensure that I'm not sharing client data or real performance data with the team here, what I think is kind of neat is we scoured the internet and we pulled down a bunch of vintage ads specifically related to dessert and cake, because who doesn't like dessert and cake, right? And we actually ran the algorithm over those different images to pull back the features. So the images obviously are real. The features that it's pulling out of those images, that was all done by the algorithm. We didn't manually do any of that, but we did mock up some of the performance data associated to the images. So that piece of the analysis is not real. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other creatives that we have here, because I just have a blast playing around with this. Okay, so this one was like 50-50 shot object pastry, right? We're not totally sure it's a pastry, and it didn't perform well. Well, what if we choose one that did perform well, but also is like a 50-50 shot whether or not this object was truly a pastry? And sure enough, if I come down here, I mean, angel food cake, is it a pastry or is it just a cake? I'm not sure. Neither was the algorithm, but I think that's pretty neat that not only is the algorithm identifying the different components within a creative image itself, it's also letting you have a little bit of wiggle room about whether what it's extracting from that image truly is what it's recognizing or not. Now, let me point out just one more of these, because we do have a couple here that did perform quite well, and we're much more sure that it's a pastry. So this one, a bit more sure, and sure enough, if I scroll down here, I see that it is a fruit cake. Well, you know, I might agree with that 70 some odd % chance that that's, or here we go, 80% chance that it's a pastry. I'm not sure if a fruit cake qualifies or not. I probably have to do some thinking on that. Whereas if I pop over here and I take a look at the one that by far had the highest performance and also the highest likelihood of being a pastry, I can see there's a nice spread of images, a whole bunch of different things that indeed I might see at the pastry counter at my local bakery. So it is quite sure that there are some pastries that are displayed here. It's quite sure there are some cakes as well. And it's quite sure that it's seeing some things that include dairy, which I just find hilarious. It's able to parse things like that out. So let's talk about what I'm looking at here on this tier, now that I've played around choosing a few different creative images. All right. So in this particular image, these are the features that the algorithm pulled out. So here's what again, I want to emphasize, especially as I'm seeing some of the questions come in the IM, and I'll leave some time for Q&A at the end as well. But all of these features that are extracted, I'm not choosing which features to analyze. So the AI algorithm has a whole catalog of different objects, words, faces, emotions, all sorts of different things. And it's scanning every image and looking to see if it recognizes anything. And if it does, then it's pulling that out and it's saying, yep, sure enough, this image contains the word cake. It's scanning all of the different text here, right? But it's identifying the word cake. It's identifying the presence of pastries, that there's dairy likely involved. Sure enough, I can see the face that's present here, the word new. So it's looking through the image and it's automatically pulling out all of those features. Now, I think that's pretty powerful, the fact that it's doing that on its own, because it means I'm not manually going through. We work with some big clients, like hundreds or even thousands of creative images, and I'm like manually typing out all of the different text and then also making a judgment call whether I should be looking for cakes or modems or routers or cars, or, you know, we work with a bunch of verticals. I'm actually able to rely on some of the algorithms that are out there that are going to do all of that hard work for me, and then it's just going to return back the results. All right, so I'm taking a look now at all of those different features that are coming in, and I see some cool things, right? Like these are all of the different features that it's really sure exist. And across each of these features, these are the incremental effect on click-through rate that it's attributing. So it's saying that the fact that I had a pretty positive overall click-through rate on this particular campaign is in large part due to the inclusion of the word cake. That was one of the driving factors of the effectiveness for this ad. That was the feature that was really, really instrumental in driving positive performance. Now, if I were to try to figure this out on my own and I was comparing this with those 3 other creatives I just showed before, I might guess that it was the incorporation of pastel colors here, or I might guess that it was the incorporation of the image of Betty Crocker that happened to be really instrumental in driving my performance. But in all of those cases, I might not be correct because what I see after running that analysis is that it really was the word cake and the inclusion of the object pastry with perhaps a touch of dairy that really drove that click-through rate to overall be much more performant than some of the other creatives that I happen to be executing. And if I want to perhaps take an even broader step back, right? We went really, really deep in. If I want to take a step back and I want to look at what overall all of my performance looks like and cherry pick some of those that did really, really well or really, really badly, that's exactly what I can do with this chart over here. So let's go ahead and choose the absolute worst performing creative that I happen to have. Here we go. And for this worst performing creative, not only am I able to see the creative, ever bake a picture cake? And sure enough, I see that bunny rabbit down there at the bottom. Well, what was impacting my click-through rate? It was the inclusion of the bunny rabbit, which is crazy, right? I've got all of this content in this ad, but the component of the ad that was really decreasing the effectiveness of my campaign was the inclusion of a bunny rabbit. Who knew? So it's really interesting that it's able to parse out those different features. And then if I overlay that data set with all of those features and then analyze which of those features were likely responsible for my overall performance, I can get really interesting insights like this. And I can go back to my creative team and say, wow, we had this terribly performing creative, and one of the biggest reasons it didn't perform well was the bunny rabbit at the bottom. Next time, leave the bunny rabbit off. Let's not do that mistake again. So one last thing that I'll touch on here, because of course, when you're looking at creative analysis or marketing performance analysis at a whole, you really want to get into some granularity around the KPIs. And so that's what we're looking at here at the very bottom of the screen. I can get an idea of, for all of the creatives out there, you can see this one performed the 67th best, or in this case, worst. And for this particular creative, there were 6.6 million impressions, 95,000 clicks. And this is just data that I'm pulling from my display ad platform, right? So I'm just getting my typical display performance information back, and I'm reporting it out here. But I think the point that I want to leave everybody with today is that, you know, often we get so boxed in thinking about marketing performance in a very traditional sense. You know, you execute a campaign, you look at the clicks, you look at the profitability, and you look at the conversions, and you report it out, and then you wash and repeat over and over again. But I just think there's so much opportunity for innovation and to think creatively, about different ways to measure performance and to really get to the why behind why we're seeing those performance figures the way that we are, not just the what, but the why. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause here. I did see there were a couple of questions that were coming in the window, and I think we can do a little bit of a Q&A. I might look to you, Andrew, to help me out.
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for, to make your life easier as much as possible. So thank you so much for going through that. Really, really powerful stuff. And really exciting to see how y'all are using some of the data. I'll go through actually maybe bouncing back and forth a little between some of the chat questions, and I answered a couple of them for you because I was able to discern, even without asking you, what the answers would be on a couple of them. But one of the questions we had in the chat was, is this dashboard live? Sophie Lee, thanks for that question. Or is there something you have to do to plug in the data manually? I think I know the answer, but I wanted to let you answer that as well.
No, that's a great question. So it's sort of live. So what we do, because ultimately you're not going to be getting a ton of new creatives all the time, is that we run it on a regular refresh schedule. So as new creatives are executed, we just load those creative images up into the system, and then we have an automated process that's pulling from the different media platforms, and it's bringing in the performance data. And then it's integrating it to the identifiers that are linked to those creative IDs. And honestly, we refresh it either daily or weekly. It kind of depends on the client. But the good news is because the algorithm automatically runs over those images, the only manual intervention that's required is that we do have to load up that creative image once it's complete and ready to launch. But aside from having to load that up, the whole process just runs automatically.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to jump over to a question. I'm going to go out of order a little bit because there's some that are kind of combo questions here. For this data specifically that you went through, which connections are you gathering that data from as you connect out, I assume, to your data warehouse or some sort of data table, but what are you using specifically there?
So what's kind of neat about this use case is it's a very narrow data set. So really what I'm connecting out to here is basically my display platform data. So again, this example is focused on display ads. So if I'm executing my display ads through Google as an example, this is just pulling down that information from Google around the metadata associated to the campaign that was executed, and then the performance report on exactly what worked and what didn't work. So that's really the primary data set. The only supplemental additional data set that I'm adding onto this is really associated to the creative images themselves, and then the output of running that, that image algorithm over the top of this, as well as the algorithm that's kind of associating or attributing the impact that the features have to performance. But really, it's just looking at kind of that one primary data set.
Awesome. I'm going to go with a couple of questions from the chat that are not back-to-back exactly, but I think they go nicely together. So one is a little longer, and then I'm going to piggyback on it because I think you can answer both of them somewhat together. James asks, the data comes from an artificial intelligence platform which analyzed images and provided these outputs. I'd like to know if the AI platform is something that's available or is it proprietary Merkle technology? And then the second piece of this is, did you have to write code on the AI algorithm to identify the keywords? And what are the other target variables? So I think those kind of go hand in hand based off of what I know here.
Yep, they sure do. So first, the algorithm that goes through and scans the images and then pulls out these different features, that is not proprietary Merkle technology. If you do a little Google on image API or you look at AI extracting image features, you will see there are a bunch that are out there. Google has one, I believe Amazon has one. I'm sure there are probably some Python packages that have them too. There's a ton that are out there that handle that process to extract the different features and to give you kind of the granularity of data that we're looking at here. Where the coding component comes in is in that second piece of analysis, right? So we get all the data, we run that algorithm over the top to pull out the features, and then we need to determine which of those features were responsible for driving performance. And so that's where, frankly, I'm partnering with some of the data scientists that we have to build a model that does that association. It looks at those features, and then it looks at the overall performance that it drove. And then that AI algorithm, so that we build, is the one that's doing that association between the two. But those first two steps of getting the data out of the platform and then identifying and pulling out those features, that's pretty well easily available through multiple types of technology that are out there today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
go, Chris. Go.
Let me jump in there. Sorry. So I think that points to a point that was asked in some of the questions around my presentation. You talk about throwing it over the fence to the data science team, doing these algorithms in Python and R, and all these things. Like what we're talking about here is we're talking about analyzing the data, and so there's and this is it really is a team effort. All of this cannot, right? We cannot come from one person. If that one person can do it all, they don't need to be working, on a team somewhere. But anyway, because that person doesn't exist, I don't think. But so using, doing what you're good at, and doing the analysis and throwing it over to people that know the Python better, And then, having somebody that can clean up. You talked about, I remember you were referring to, what is this creative 1, 2, 3, 4? Like, yeah, it's going to come through dirty, but then knowing where to go get, the reference table, and then, knowing the people that can clean up the data or do, X, Y, and Z. So I think it's just a matter of working well as a teammate, knowing where to get, the right pieces. And I mean, like you said, I mean, it's all out there. A little bit of Googling can go a long way. But also, not thinking that you have to do all of this yourself. I think that's like with the sentiment analysis, right? I mean, doing any of that, it's going to take a lot of different types of skills, and then putting it into a visualization like this. Typically, that's where the data science teams, at least that I've worked with, have struggled, is trying to get it into a visual component that actually makes sense, that you can relate that back to the end user. So anyway.
No, I love it. I'm sure you saw me nodding, right? Like that's such a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and something that we've really pushed ourselves to do more of, to say, all right, we've got these teams of people who are super passionate about integrating data and visualizing data. Well, what if we start to establish more partnerships within our organization, between bridging those folks with the data scientists, right? Who are doing these like insanely awesome, super deep, hard to understand analytics. What if we can take some of that stuff and then help to elevate the communication of it so that it's easier to understand and consume and take action on? This is one of the things I love about having built this, is we're talking to folks we'd never talked to before, our creative teams, who are not typically doing deep data analysis. But if we're able to leverage data visualization to help them consume the analysis, like, by golly, there's so much more that they can do with optimizing their performance. And it's something we're really, really excited about.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. I think that's a good lead up, actually, for something we'll talk about here in a second, of like, what do we want to talk about in future meetings, right? Because I think there very much is this opportunity to talk about, like, there's this line that sometimes gets blurred between data scientist and data analyst. How do we think about that, right? And how do you build a team if you're trying to do something there? So a lot of good fodder for us to go through. A few more questions here. I think we can get through almost all of them. Is have you tried Tableau's explain data feature on the click-through rate to see if it identified the same features in the same direction? And if yes, what did you find out?
I haven't, but that's a great idea. I'm going to do that.
New Merkle product. Bruce and Philly, you can hit up Amanda for your commission later. She will absolutely send you a check, I'm sure. I know Bruce, so
I think, Andrew, that answers one of the other questions too, about what types of things did you analyze? And so that's a really great way to start utilizing that feature, not just for this, but for anybody else analyzing this data, utilizing that functionality in the explained data to help us get more robust analytics.
Absolutely. There was a comment here for you, Amanda, that Michelle said that she's sitting here in awe of this dashboard. Wow, it's beautiful. So just kudos on what you and your team have put together here. Michelle actually is very active in both the chat and the QA. So I'm going to have another question from her here, which is, what was the development time for the dashboard that you showed us today, from concept to production and being in use?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think it was probably about 8 weeks that we spent from the original conception of this idea to building it through. But I'll tell you, what was funny is getting the model and the data working together and figuring out how to run that algorithm on top. It turned out that actually wasn't the hardest part. One of the areas that we really struggled with was finding out how you can slice the data in a meaningful way, and then also anticipating what the series of questions through data discovery might look like across different audiences. So I know my team spent a lot of time thinking through, for example, when I showed the distribution here, right? Well, word baking is positive, but what does that mean? Were they all positive? So how do you think through that series of questions and ensure that the user experience matches what we think that's going to be? That was definitely one of the toughest parts. But I'll tell you, I got to do another plug to Anthony Fancher on my team, who is the master of design for this dashboard and who came up with a lot of the complex functionality that we're looking at here. Without him kind of thinking outside the box and how to answer some of the questions we thought would pop up along the way, I think this would have been a lot tougher than it otherwise was.
Totally understand. We're going to go one more question, I think, that has been asked in a couple of different places. Maybe a short answer, maybe not. And then if there's a question that didn't get answered, please join into the LinkedIn group and we can ask it there. And if Amanda gets in that group, we can get those things answered as well. We didn't talk about that at all, but are the dashboard and the data set available at all for download, or is this something that just sits within the Merkle stack today?
Good question. Unfortunately, it's not something that I can make available for download because it is something that we sell and we provide to our clients. But I'm excited that I at least got to demo it today so you can kind of see the use case. And then obviously, if you're interested in learning more about it, or you have a use case that you're interested in chatting about, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I'd be happy to chat.
Awesome. I love that. That's one of my favorite parts about Tableau in general, is just exactly what you did right there and what Chris did at the end of his presentation of like, hey, let me know if you have questions about this and let's actually talk. It's real people. It's not just talking heads who are going through this. So
that's part of the data fam, man.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
I got the shirt on today. That's exactly right.
Hashtag.
I didn't plan that actually. It just happened to be what was in my closet. Thank you both so much. I'm going to reshare my screen here in just a second and go back through just a couple more things that we want to make sure everybody's aware of. So let me just pull up my screen here. There we go. Where did Zoom go? You're hiding from me. That's how it always works, isn't it? When you need to get to where you need to go, you can't actually get there. All right. So if you want to help with this user group, right? This is brand new. Please send me an email. We would love to have some more volunteers to be able to help procure speakers and to be able to put this thing on for you all and this marketing community that we love so much. The next meeting, again, we don't have it firmly on the calendar. Be on the lookout for that. But I do have two things. I plugged the LinkedIn group. The other one, we want to hear from you. This is your group. This is not my group. This is something that I want you all to be telling us what you want to see, what you want to learn, what you want to hear about within the marketing ecosystem and within Tableau. And so that bit.ly there, Marketing Tug Ideas, please go there. It's just one question. Submit your ideas for what you want to have covered during this time so that we can really make this beneficial to everybody who attends. We know that we're going to have folks that are at massive agencies. We're going to have brand folks. We're going to have people who are consulting and folks who are at really tiny agencies from all across the world. And we want to make sure this is something that's really beneficial to you. So Christopher, Amanda, thank you so much again for your time today. Really appreciate everything that you put into to really sharing with this community little bits about yourself and how they could be better, obviously, in their day-to-day. So thanks, everybody, again. Really appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everybody. Bye.